Recently, the world celebrated International Polar Bear Day to raise awareness about how endangered the species is due to climate change, specifically a rapidly warming Arctic. Receding pack ice means fewer seals, their main food, and heavy industrialization has caused more interference in their habitats. A stunning image of a young polar bear drifting to sleep on an iceberg in the Svalbard archipelago after 3 days desperately searching for food actually won the Wildlife Photography of the Year People's Choice Award. Polar bears are not native to Iceland, but sometimes it happens that some can drift to Icelandic shores from Greenland. In the past years, there have been some sightings. The bears were shot, unfortunately. Whereas plans of relocation did come up, the bears were in such poor condition that it wasn't considered a viable option. Throughout the whole history of Iceland, there have been sightings of approximately 600 bears, according to the Icelandic Institute of Natural History. So I was wondering if, from the time of the Viking settlement, we can also find some reports about this. And we can, actually. Hvítabjarnar appear in Icelandic sagas and, more importantly, in Landnámabók, the Book of Settlements, describing how Vikings organized themselves in the 10th century, although often their descendants are the ones mentioned from a century later. In the Book of Settlements, we have a very interesting character by the name of Ingimundur, said to be a great Viking to whom a seeress prophesied he would settle in an undiscovered country. She says something had vanished from his pocket and wouldn't be found until he started digging for his high pillars. He then sends 2 Sami people on a magic ride, so kind of like shamanistic trance, and they locate a statuette of the god Freyr in a valley, which persuades him to travel to Iceland with his friends. And as they traveled through the landscape, they named everything, often with animal reference, according to what they might have seen. So, for example, Hrútafjörður, that would be the fjord of the rams, Sauðardalur, that would be the sheep's valley, or Svínavatn, that would be the lake of pigs. Ingimund finally recognizes the spot and settles in Vatnsdalur. So, a fascinating foundation story with some heathen and magical elements. One day, Ingimundur finds a female polar bear with 2 cubs on a lake called Húnavatn, literally the Lake of the Cubs. He sends them to King Harald in Norway, Harald Fairhair, with whom he had a good relationship, as Norwegians had never seen polar bears before, says the text, which makes sense because the Svalbard Islands were only discovered at the end of the 16th century by Willem Barents. The king was very excited, I guess, because he gave him a ship full of timber so he can continue with his expedition in Iceland. The gift of a polar bear cub is also mentioned in Vatnsdøla saga, a very well received gift implying somehow the idea that it could have been tamed to an extent. It's not the only reference to capturing and offering a Greenlandic polar bear as a gift. In Grönlendingaþáttur, Kolbeinn brings a polar bear from Greenland for King Haraldr Gilli. In Auðunarþáttur Vestfirska, we have Auðun, who is a poor man, but spends all his fortune to buy a polar bear that he takes on his travels and gives to King Svein. And the polar bear is described as being extremely beautiful and red-cheeked, which was a sign of power. And he is even described as having been trained. Barður from Krokarev saga also acquires a trained polar bear he brings to the Norwegian court, delighting the retinue. Such examples show us that polar bears could actually be tamed, which is further supported by legal texts. In the Grey Goose Law in the Grogos, it is stated that you could be fully outlawed if your pet dog or bear injured someone. If the attack resulted in death, it was considered that the owner committed the crime. This whole idea of the tamed polar bear might also have a relationship to their whereabouts and lack of interaction with human communities. Brown or black bears were a real threat to communities in Scandinavia, while polar bears caused a feeling of curiosity rather and attraction, because they were so different. You could also hunt and eat polar bear meat if you respected the rules of fasting, as specified in the same code, Grogos. And of course, incidents could also occur because, we're dealing with polar bears, like the case of Angeir in the Book of Settlements, who together with his son gets killed by a polar bear while searching for their sheep, after which another son, Odd, kills the bear and eats it as revenge, However, he turns evil afterwards, a supernatural touch here to explain some human traits. Polar bears often appear in dreams as well. For example, in Thorstein's Þóttir Uxafots, we have a child of great abilities by the name of Thorstein, who we find rushing in a room with his grandfather around, and he falls, upon which his grandfather Geitir, who was in some kind of trance, he was cloaked, he laughs and he tells him that a polar bear was running after him, and he fell over the polar bear cub. A thing which he interprets as the boy being of a great family. The bear can also be seen as a fylgja, a follower, that part of the soul, often in animal shape, dream animals that foretell something important and represent people's personalities. Now, this might not only have been a literary device, but also a part of an underlying cultural belief. In Orvar Odd saga, when Odd is denied to sail with his kinsmen Gudmundur and Sigurður, Gudmundur has a dream of a polar bear laying in a ring around the island with its tail meeting its head, interestingly reminding us of the myth of the snake Jormungand, which Sigurður interprets as the fylgja of Odd, the fetch or follower, the spirit animal, but interestingly he also mentions that Odd has a wolf mind. That would be the Old Norse word hugr, set against them. So personality and intent seem separate in such dreams, although these concepts are not that clear-cut, especially in the later sagas from the 14th century. In Hrolf's saga Gautreks Queen Ingigerður first dreams of a red-cheeked polar bear that follows the lion, King Hrolf Gautreks in front of a pack of wolves. She knows that the bear is the fylgja of a champion or prince accompanying the king, and she is in fact right, because this is Ingjaldur, Hrolf's heroic foster brother. At any rate, to have a polar bear represent you was definitely a sign of strength, prestige, and high social status in such literary sources. If you enjoyed this story, please hit the subscribe button for much more on Old Norse.